The city never stopped moving. Cars honked impatiently, hurried pedestrians weaved through crowded sidewalks, and the summer sun cast long golden streaks across the pavement. But amidst all the noise, all the rush, one small art stand sat quietly on a corner, almost invisible to the world. Behind it sat Emma Brooks, a young woman with paint-splattered jeans and an exhausted but determined look in her eyes. This wasn't just a stand selling paintings. This was her last hope. Emma adjusted the small handwritten sign on her table. Original artwork. Every purchase helps fund my cancer treatment. She wasn't asking for pity. She was fighting. Her hands, still sore from her latest round of chemo, rested on the table as she watched people pass by. Some glanced at her work but kept walking. Others paused, read the sign, and sighed sympathetically before moving on. Sympathy didn't pay hospital bills. Hours passed. She had barely sold anything. Her arms ached. Her head felt light from exhaustion, but she refused to close up. Then something shifted in the air. A figure approached. An older man wearing a worn-out leather jacket and a weathered cowboy hat tilted low over his face. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't distracted by his phone like the others. He stopped in front of her stand. Emma barely noticed at first. She had seen all kinds of customers, curious tourists, wealthy businessmen who sneered, kind-hearted strangers who pitied her but never bought anything. But this man, he was different. He didn't just glance at the paintings. He studied them. His fingers grazed the edges of a black-and-white landscape, a lone cowboy standing under an endless sky. Emma finally spoke, her voice hoarse from the long day. "See anything you like?" The man smirked, just slightly before responding. "Depends," he said, his voice deep and steady. "What's the story behind these?" No one had asked that before. Not like this. And somehow Emma knew. This was the moment that would change everything. Emma hesitated for a moment. Most customers just asked about the price, not the story behind the art. But this man's gaze was steady, patient, like he had all the time in the world. She took a slow breath and answered. "I paint because I have to," she said simply. "It's the only thing I can control right now." The man nodded, encouraging her to continue. So she told him. She told him about the long nights in the hospital, about the way the doctors spoke in soft, measured tones, like they were trying to prepare her for the worst. She told him about the rising medical bills, the way her parents pretended everything would be okay, even though she knew they were drowning in debt. Art had always been her escape. When words failed her, when the pain became too much, she let her brush do the talking. The colors, the strokes, they were her way of reclaiming control. But now, painting wasn't just about passion. It was about survival. Emma swallowed, glancing down at her work. "Every painting I sell gets me closer to affording my next round of treatment." The words felt heavy in the air. Most people, when they heard her story, gave her a sad smile and walked away. But this man, he didn't look away. Instead, he picked up the black and white landscape, the one of the lone cowboy standing against a vast, open sky. He studied it in silence for a long moment, then finally spoke. "I'll take this one," he said. Emma barely reacted at first. She had done this a dozen times before. Customers picking a piece, handing over cash, walking away. But then, instead of reaching for his wallet, the man did something unexpected. He pulled out a checkbook. Emma blinked in confusion. Who even carried checkbooks anymore? She watched as he calmly uncapped a pen, his movements slow and deliberate. He scribbled something down, tore the check from the book and handed it to her. Emma took it hesitantly, her fingers barely gripping the paper. Then she looked down, and her breath caught in her throat. Not $200, not $2,000, $50,000. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. This must be a mistake," she whispered, her voice shaking. The man smirked slightly, tilting his cowboy hat back just enough for her to see his face fully. And that's when she realized who he was. Clint Eastwood, the legend himself. Her breath caught. The Hollywood icon, the man her father idolized, the star whose films had shaped generations. And now he was standing in front of her, holding one of her paintings, handing her a check that could change her life. She opened her mouth, struggling to find words. "Thank you. Why are you doing this? I don't deserve this." But nothing came out, because nothing in her life had ever prepared her for this moment. At first, no one noticed. The city kept moving as it always did, fast, distracted, unaware of the moment unfolding on the sidewalk. Emma stared at the check in her trembling hands, her mind struggling to keep up. $50,000. Not charity, not a donation, a payment for her art. She looked up at Clint Eastwood, still in disbelief. I don't know what to say," she stammered. He smirked, tilting his cowboy hat back slightly. "Then don't say anything. Just keep painting." And with that, he turned to leave. But before he could take more than a few steps, the first whisper came. A teenage boy with earbuds in his ears stopped mid-step, squinting at Clint as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Wait, is that Clint Eastwood?" A woman nearby turned, her phone half raised. She gasped. Then another voice. "Oh my God, it is Clint Eastwood." And just like that, chaos erupted. People whipped around, eyes widening, conversations halting mid-sentence. Phones shot up in every direction. Someone started recording. A group of college students rushed forward. A businessman who had ignored Emma's stand earlier doubled back, eyes darting between her and Clint. And then, the tipping point. "Did he just buy a painting?" someone asked. "Wait, for how much?" Another voice followed. That's when the real frenzy began. Someone caught sight of the check still clutched in Emma's trembling hands. $50,000! A woman shrieked. The crowd exploded. People swarmed her stand, their eyes darting between her and Clint, trying to understand what they were witnessing. And then, the wildest thing happened. A man in a blue polo shirt suddenly reached for a painting. "I'll take this one," he called out, pulling out his wallet. Before Emma could even process it, another hand shot forward. And this one. How much? Within minutes, paintings that had sat untouched for days were being snatched up, one by one. No haggling, no second-guessing. People just bought. A teenage girl turned to her mom, tugging at her sleeve. "I need cash now. I want one before they're all gone." Emma barely moved, still frozen in shock. And Clint? He just stood there, calm as ever, hands tucked into his pockets, watching it all unfold. Finally, he leaned in slightly and muttered just loud enough for Emma to hear. "Told you, kid. Just keep painting." And with that, he tipped his hat and walked away. Emma sat there, watching in stunned silence as her once-ignored booth became the hottest attraction in the city. And the craziest part? This wasn't even the end. This was just the beginning. That night, Emma's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, she thought something was wrong. The screen was flooded with notifications, her inbox overflowing with messages. Then she saw the headlines. Clint Eastwood buys young artist's painting for $50,000, and you won't believe why. Hollywood legend helps struggling painter in the most unbelievable way. Teen's art stand becomes the talk of the nation after surprise visit from Clint Eastwood. Her photo was everywhere. A single image. Clint Eastwood standing at her tiny art booth, holding the black and white cowboy painting, was plastered across news sites, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. A video someone had taken of the exact moment he handed her the check. Over 3 million views. Her best friend Lucas called first. "Emma, you are literally everywhere." I don't even know what's happening," she whispered, staring at the endless wave of comments. Then the messages started pouring in, not just from strangers, buyers. "Hi, Emma, I'd love to buy a piece of your work. Do you ship to Texas?" Art collectors. "Your story is incredible. Would you be open to a commission? Name your price." Families. "My daughter is also fighting cancer. Your strength gives us hope. I'd love to buy a painting to support you." She scrolled, her heart pounding. Dozens of messages turned into hundreds, then thousands. Orders, donations, requests for interviews, and then the email that stopped her cold. Subject, Gallery Inquiry. She clicked on it with trembling fingers. A prestigious New York art gallery was offering to represent her. "Emma, your story is remarkable. We'd love to showcase your work in our upcoming exhibition. Let's talk." Her hand clutched her chest, feeling her heart hammering against her ribs. This was real. She wasn't just selling paintings anymore. She had become a symbol of resilience. 1 month later, Emma walked into the hospital for her final round of chemo, paid in full, every bill, every debt, every crushing financial burden that had once threatened her future. Gone. Because of one painting. Because of one moment. Because a man in a cowboy hat stopped, listened, and believed in her. The treatment was rough, but this time she wasn't scared. Because outside that hospital room, her future was waiting for her. 1 week later, she received a handwritten letter in the mail. The envelope was simple. No return address, just her name. She carefully opened it, her fingers shaking. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Emma, your fight reminds me why some stories still matter. Never stop telling yours." Clint, tears welled in her eyes. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her chest. Then, later that night, she picked up a brush. Because now, her story was just beginning.